going to do some planting here, aren't we? We've got transplants and some tomatoes, and then you brought some seeds, right?
Yeah, so we've got our bed all ready to go. We've amended it. We've loosened the soil. And we've also moistened it with some water. So we want it to be that perfect moisture,
Right.
like a wrung out sponge,
Right.
such that when you squeeze it, the water doesn't come pouring out, but just one little drop form. So
Right.
the moisture is important. Let's talk about some seeds. So one great type of seed to just directly sow are beans, a summer favorite. And by direct sow, I mean we're going to put it right in the location that we want it to grow,
Right.
as opposed to broadcasting it.
Right.
And it's quite simple, really. We take this seed, we're going to put it in, I just push it down with my thumb or finger about to that first knuckle.
Right.
And make sure that it's covered up. And then I like to make sure that they're spaced apart properly, because spacing is really important. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is just a little stick I have. I've measured it to 6 inches.
That's great.
And then I put the next seed in. And in this way, I direct sow my bean seeds.
That's perfect.
And what's really essential for good bean germination is going to be maintaining that moisture.
Right.
And so, you can water the seeds after you put them in, but then you want to maintain that moisture until you see them germinating.
Right.
And that can be hard in dry, sunny California in the springtime or the summertime. So if you can't water them daily or twice daily, you can consider putting down like a piece of cloth or a piece of cardboard, something to try to trap
Keep
that
it
moisture
moist.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Good.
And the seeds don't need light to germinate, so you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
And then as soon as they're germinated, you can take off that cover.
Okay. I see you've got some tomatoes there.
Yeah, so let's talk about transplants.
Okay.
And that's probably the vast majority of how we get seedlings into the ground. And there's some important features to consider when selecting your transplants and identifying when they should go in the ground.
Right.
Many of us buy seedlings from the store, so let's talk about what to look for. I have 3 tomato examples here. And so one thing to look for is we don't want flowers on our young seedlings.
Right.
It's so tempting to buy the tomato with the little baby tomato growing, or the flowers, or to buy like our bedded flowers that are already blooming because they're so attractive.
Right.
But when you think about it from a biological standpoint, flowers happen because the plant thinks it's going to die and it's reproducing. And we don't want it to go to that stage prematurely. We want it to have this long life in our bed all summer long.
Right.
So we want younger, smaller plants. So let's look at these 2. We have a shorter one with more leaves and a taller one with less dense leaves. And my suggestion is to go with the smaller plant because it's going to be less root bound. It's going to be easier to get established. This one is going to get caught in this wind, for example.
Right.
But also this one appears like it was maybe in a dark place and it was looking for sunlight. So it has this elongated growth.
Yeah, a little leggy.
A little leggy, yeah. So let's put that one aside. And then looking at this one, it's getting on the large side. If there was a smaller one, I would buy a smaller one.
Right.
But you can see it has these flowers already. I would just pinch that off.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Show people how to do that. Yeah, that's good. And then you can also plant that a little higher too. It doesn't just have to be right to here. You could, for the tomato, you could plant it a little higher to get it down into the ground for more roots. What about the difference of these 2 plants?
Yeah, so the other thing to look for is healthy plants. You can see here this one has leaf yellowing. The margins of the leaves are browning. It doesn't look quite as vigorous, so I would leave this one at the nursery.
Right. Okay.
So now that we have selected a plant that we want to put in the ground, I like to turn it upside down, squeeze it out, and now you can see the roots.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And a lot of times when we have these larger plants, they have this abundant root growth,
Right.
and it's somewhat root bound.
Yeah.
So what I like to do to prep them for the soil is to actually loosen those roots.
Okay.
And I call it tickling the roots.
Oh,
So we kind of just use that finger motion
yeah, good.
and loosen them up. I'm always surprised at the end of a season how intact the shape of the pot is when I pull that seedling out. So I think it's really important to loosen this up and let the roots know that they have new soil to explore.
Right.
Okay, so this seedling I would say is ready to go in the ground now.
Okay.
So let's get our spot ready.
Okay.
And as simple as making a hole can sound, there is some artistry to it.
Right.
So when we put our trowel in the ground to transplant, the tendency is to do this pivoting motion.
Right.
And when we do that, we open the hole, but then the bottom of the trowel tends to push the soil up and close the hole. So instead, we want to put the trowel in at an angle away from us and then scooch the whole trowel so it opens that hole
Okay.
up.
Okay.
So what that looks like is put it right in, and I'm going to pull that open and
Right.
move the whole wall of soil.
Okay.
Make a nice space.
And while you've got that open like that, how about if I add some vermicompost?
This is a great opportunity to add something like vermicompost and get that those nutrients right at the soil interface. I would be cautious about adding a stronger fertilizer because that can burn the roots,
Right.
but we don't have that risk with something like vermicompost. So let's get our plant. We've loosened the roots. Let's open up that hole and put this plant in. You can take off any leaves that are going to be underground, just pinch them off. Cover those roots. Make sure there's good soil root contact.
Right.
And then soon enough, you'll want to add water
Right.
to close up any of those air pore spaces that were created during the transplant process. We want that good soil root contact.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that looks really great.
So that's a good example of a transplant like that. Now, we also have maybe smaller transplants from little cell packs or from your own garden nursery.
Right.
And these can, I can't dump this whole tray out to get those seedlings out. So my favorite little tool is a little butter knife.
Okay.
And so I just slide that butter knife in on the edge,
Oh, wow.
and the seedling just pops right out.
Wow, that's great.
And as long as we have 2, 3, 4 true leaves, these are the true leaves.
Right.
These are the cotyledons, the seedling leaves, we're good to go. And this is a small enough root that I'm not going to disturb it. I'm just going to plant it right in.
Right. And what is that? What are we planting?
This is a winter squash.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah. And again, I have my measuring stick. This
Right.
one I've measured to 12 inches. And then you want to do your correct spacing. And just for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to put this just right next to this tomato. We'll make that hole. I open it up,
Let me get the vermicompost.
grab a little vermicompost and put it right in the hole.
There you go.
I'll mix it in, recreate that hole, and drop this seedling in.
All right.
And we're ready to go.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Add some water as soon as you can,
Okay.
and these little seedlings will thrive.
Fantastic. Okay, so Margaret, we have a couple of plants here. Foxglove that's not blooming and one that is.
Yeah, so this is a great example of where you might have the situation in a nursery where you could pick the blooming one or the non-blooming one.
Right.
And as hard as it can be to not pick the beautiful blooms,
Right.
you will have more blooms and longer production from the non-blooming one.
Okay.
So that's my suggestion, is to go with the non-blooming plant.
And then we've got a cucumber here with an interesting little
Yeah.
note.
A common situation that you may encounter is having multiple seedlings in one pot. Now, for the larger plants like a tomato, a pepper, a cucumber, I would separate those. And this takes a sensitivity of the hand and maybe even the ears to listen to the tearing of those roots. So first, loosen those roots by tickling them with your fingers. And you really kind of want to be a little bit aggressive, but you'll be impressed with how these plants can recover. And I'm gonna just pull one of them, and if I feel like I can get enough roots, I'll work on that one. And it's a combination of tearing and loosening.
Right. Look at you. Very delicate hands you have. Beautiful.
So, okay, that's a pretty small root mass. Let's see what we can get out of this one.
Yeah, that's going to be bigger.
Much better. So, I will definitely plant these two. And I can plant this one, but it may or may not make it. So that's what we want to think about when we have multiples, is try to split them up.
Well, here we have another example of basil.
Yeah, so these leafy plants, basil, lettuce, etc., you could consider tearing them apart or leaving them together. It's really up to you. But these will do okay planted as a group.
Right. You'll just have a bigger plant.
You will. You will.
And basil always looks good when it's nice and bushy next to a tomato plant.
Exactly. So you could leave these together.
Okay.